Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, it sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? When was the Mashayamombe Vocational Training Center, the VTC, actually founded?
Yeah, you'd think that'd be straightforward. A big government place teaching important skills.
Mm.
There should be a plaque, a document, something clear.
Exactly. But our sources are telling us that a clear, definitive public record, that single date, it's just not available.
It really isn't. It's surprisingly elusive. So if we want to know when it started, we can't just look it up. We have to approach it differently.
Right. So our mission today is to kind of step away from the missing paperwork and put on our historical detective hats.
Okay, I like that. Detectives of institutional history.
Yes. We're going to try and reconstruct the timeline by looking at three different types of clues, really. Circumstantial evidence.
They work out.
We'll look at the big picture, the national policy context first, then some specific personnel data, and finally, and this is kind of amazing, the actual physical state of the buildings.
Okay, policy, people, and physical decay.
Oh.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's dive in. Okay, let's start with that big picture, the widest historical bracket. To figure out when Mashayamombe VTC might have been built, we need to understand why it would have been built then.
Right. You have to set the scene.
So what does the national policy framework, the government's goals at the time, tell us about a likely time frame for this VTC?
Okay, so you really have to zoom out to post-independence Zimbabwe. The creation of this VTC fits right into a massive national effort to expand technical and vocational education and training, or TVET.
TVET, right.
This wasn't just some small side project. It was really fundamental to the government's vision for rebuilding the country after independence.
And the sources show this was pushed from the top, yeah, a specific government mandate.
Oh, absolutely. Post-independence, the government was juggling a couple of big priorities.
Yeah.
First, the obvious one. They needed skilled workers, fast, to rebuild infrastructure, get the economy going.
Makes sense.
But second, and this is really crucial for places like Mashayamombe, was decentralization. They actively wanted to push skills training out of just the big cities.
Get it into the rural areas.
Exactly. Into rural districts, marginalized communities, places that hadn't had those kinds of opportunities before. Empowering youth there was a major goal.
Okay, and did this whole push, this policy drive, have a particular peak period? When was the momentum really strong?
Yeah, the documents suggest the big push really started in the late 1980s, and then it really ramped up through the 1990s. That was a key decade, arguably.
And were there examples showing this could work?
Definitely. They point to places like Ponasaivanhu Technical College, which was up and running successfully as early as 1980. So the model is proven.
Okay, so if we place Mashayamombe VTC within that context, that national project, it gives us our first kind of wide window.
It does.
Given that mandate, it seems highly probable, right, that its construction and maybe its first phase of operation happened sometime between, say, 1990 and maybe 2005?
That feels like a reasonable starting range. 1990 to 2005, it's a 15-year span, which is quite broad.
It is broad, but it tells us why it likely exists. It was born when the government wanted these kinds of places and was funding them.
Exactly. It provides the essential backdrop. But yeah, 15-year window,
Yeah,
we need to do better than that if we're being detectives.
we do. We need something more concrete. But
Yeah.
hang on, before we get to the harder data, there's something you mentioned earlier about the location and the name itself, Mashayamombe.
Yes. That's really significant, I think.
Why? What's the story there?
Well, it connects right back to that decentralization idea, but also to national identity. The place, Mashayamombe, it's historically powerful. It was the stronghold of Chief Chinengundu Mashayamombe.
Okay.
He was a major leader of the resistance during the first Kimarenga, the uprising against colonial rule back in 1896-97. A really key figure.
Wow. So naming a brand new VTC after him in that location, that's a statement, isn't it?
It's absolutely a statement. It signals that this isn't just another trade school. It's meant to be important, tied to national heritage, to resistance, to empowerment. It elevates the project.
They weren't just building workshops, they were kind of building a symbol.
Precisely. And that's important to remember when we look at what happened later. That symbolic weight was there from the start.
Okay, got it. So let's move from that broad context and symbolism to something solid. Staff records. If the policy window is maybe 1990 to 2005, what can personnel files tell us about when this place was definitely up and running?
Right. This is where we get our first really concrete anchor point in time. The sources highlight one specific person, Mr. Chikoti Sandalamu.
And his role was?
He was a senior lecturer at the VTC.
Okay, senior lecturer. And do we know his appointment date, like the day he officially started?
We do. The record shows his appointment date was March 2010.
March 2010. Okay. Now, someone might just look at that and say, aha, 2010, that's when it was founded.
Right, that would be the simple conclusion.
But the analysis in our sources says, no, hold on. That date doesn't mean it started then. It actually proves it must be quite a bit older. How does that work?
Well, it's all about the title. Senior lecturer. That's the key. You don't just hire a senior lecturer the day after you open the doors.
Right. It implies maturity, structure.
Exactly. Think about what needs to be in place for an institution, especially in the formal TVET system, to appoint someone at that level by 2010.
Okay, walk us through it. What does that appointment imply?
Well, first, the VTC absolutely must have secured its official accreditation from the government bodies. That process alone takes time, needs established courses, standards.
Okay, accreditation. What else?
Second, you need students. Enough students to justify needing specialized teaching staff at a senior level. You don't need a senior lecturer for a handful of trainees.
Right, a certain scale of operation.
And third, the term senior itself usually means something. It often suggests either someone promoted from within, meaning they were already junior staff, or they needed to bring in someone highly experienced to manage or lead existing programs. Either way, it points to established operations.
So by 2010, it wasn't just open for business. It was a fully functioning, structured institution.
Pretty much, yes. It had courses, students, presumably funding streams, reporting lines, all the stuff that takes time to build. The rule of thumb, really, in looking at these things is that for a VTC to get to the point of needing senior lecturers, you would need several years of stable operation beforehand. Maybe, 5 to 7 years is a minimum guess.
Wow. Okay, so March 2010 isn't the start date. It's more like the latest possible date by which we know it was already mature and running smoothly.
That's a good way to put it. It's the earliest point we can verify structured operation. So the actual founding, the construction, getting the first courses accredited, has to be significantly before 2010.
Okay, so the staff records push the operational date back firmly before 2010. But we still don't have that initial construction date pinned down. If the paperwork, the personnel files don't give us the full story, where else can we look?
Well, this is where it gets perhaps unexpectedly revealing. We look at the buildings themselves, at their condition.
Right, the physical decay angle. So we're moving from HR records to crumbling infrastructure.
It sounds strange, but yes. To really confirm that pre-2010 timeline and maybe push it back even further, we look at parliamentary field audit reports. These were done quite a bit later, around 2018 and 2019.
Almost a decade after Mr. Sandalemi started.
Exactly. And these audits specifically documented the physical state of the VTC's buildings.
And the picture they painted wasn't pretty, was it? It wasn't just about needing a lick of paint.
Oh, not at all. The auditors found really extensive deterioration. I mean, the sources mentioned some incredible specifics.
Like what?
Like finding actual ant mounds, not outside, but inside the administration blocks.
Ant mounds? Inside the admin building?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously. And also just a widespread, total lack of window panes in that same main administrative building, the place meant to, manage the institution.
Wow. So forget dusty archives. Our best clue here is literally insects and broken glass.
It's pretty vivid evidence, isn't it? And you have to think about what that implies. That kind of decay, especially things like ant mounds establishing themselves inside a permanent structure.
Yeah, that doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely not. That's not a result of missing maintenance for 6 months or even a year or two. For a building, especially an admin block, to get to that state, it suggests it had been standing and likely neglected or seriously undermaintained for a really substantial period.
Okay, so if we try and work backwards from that 2018-2019 audit, what kind of time frame does that level of decay suggest for the building's age?
Well, the analysis and the sources suggest that this kind of advanced decay points to the buildings having been physically standing for probably more than 10 to 15 years before that audit took place.
Okay, 10 to 15 years before 2018-19. So let's do the math. If we take the longer estimate, 15 years back from 2018, that puts construction around 2003.
Right.
Even the shorter estimate, 10 years back, puts it around 2008.
Which is still well before that 2010 staff appointment.
Exactly. So the physical evidence, the state of the buildings, it strongly backs up the idea that the VTC was built long before 2010. It pushes the construction timeframe right back into that early policy window we talked about, the 1990s or early 2000s.
It really ties things together, doesn't it? The policy context says build these things here then. The staffing says it was mature well before 2010, and the decay says these buildings are old, likely pre-2003, 2008.
The evidence triangulates, pointing to that earlier period.
Yes. And this brings us back to that irony, the contradiction we touched on earlier with the name.
Ah, right, the connection between the aspirational naming and the later reality.
Precisely. If we accept that the VTC was established, let's say, in the 90s or early 2000s, named Mashayamombe, to signify national heritage, resistance, youth empowerment.
A real symbol.
A powerful symbol. And then you fast forward to the late 2010s, and that very symbol, that admin block, is literally crumbling. It's got ant mounds inside and no windows.
The contrast is stark.
It's more than stark. It suggests that the physical neglect isn't just about budgets, maybe. It feels like a failure to live up to that original foundational mission embedded in the name itself.
So if we pull all these threads together now, the policy drive from, say, 1990 to 2005, the proof from staffing that it needed to be institutionally mature before 2010, and the physical evidence of decay suggesting construction probably before 2003.
Yeah, you get a pretty consistent picture.
It builds a really strong circumstantial case, doesn't it? Even without that one founding document.
Absolutely. We've effectively used these different lines of evidence to triangulate the likely establishment period. Mashayamombe VTC looks very clearly like a product of that initial post-independence push for TVET expansion.
Likely built sometime in the early 1990s, or maybe the very early 2000s at the latest.
That seems to be where all the evidence points. It fits the policy timeline, it allows time for institutional maturity before 2010, and it accounts for the significant decay seen later.
So what does all this detective work mean for you, the listener?
Well, I think it shows that even when the straightforward answer, that official document, is missing, you can still piece together a really robust history.
Yeah, by looking critically at different kinds of evidence, government policies, an employee's job title, even, the state of the building itself.
It shows how these indirect clues can tell a surprisingly detailed story, maybe even more revealing than just a simple date.
And finding that true origin period, knowing it was part of that early, ambitious national project, helps us understand its context better. It helps frame the challenges it faced later.
Especially when you consider that initial symbolic weight.
Exactly. If it was established with the significant weight of the Mashayamombe name, intended as this beacon of heritage and empowerment, and then seeing its later neglect, that physical decay, it really does raise some tough questions. Questions about long-term commitment, accountability.
Yeah, about the follow-through on those initial, very powerful post-independence ideals.
Right. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. We've seen the sources indicate Mashayamombe VTC was meant to be a vehicle for national heritage and empowerment, given its name and timing. But then we see the evidence from 2018-2019, those ant mounds, the missing windows. What does that stark physical deterioration really tell us about how the commitment to that original foundational mission might have changed over time?
Did the commitment to the symbol perhaps decay along with the structure itself?
Yeah.
That's something to think about.